Mrs. Elena Rodriguez counted the crumpled bills in her worn leather wallet for the third time that morning, her heart sinking as the numbers refused to change. $11.43. That was all that stood between her and payday, still 4 days away. Outside her small apartment window, the autumn rain drummed against the glass while her coffee maker sputtered to life, brewing the last of the generic brand grounds she'd stretched for 2 weeks. She glanced at the kitchen clock and realized she'd been standing there for 10 minutes, lost in calculations that never seemed to add up. But Elena had learned long ago that dwelling on empty bank accounts wouldn't fill them, so she grabbed her canvas tote bag, double-checked that her lunch was packed, and headed out into the gray morning toward Jefferson Elementary. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The hallways of Jefferson Elementary buzzed with the familiar chaos of morning arrival. Children's voices echoed off the pale green walls as they rushed to their lockers, backpacks bouncing against small shoulders. Elena unlocked her third-grade classroom and flipped on the fluorescent lights, watching them flicker to life over rows of tiny desks adorned with hand-drawn name tags. She loved this moment before the day officially began, when possibility hung in the air like chalk dust, and every lesson plan felt like a door waiting to be opened. As she arranged papers on her desk, Elena noticed a small figure hovering near the classroom doorway. Marcus Thompson stood there clutching his backpack straps, his dark eyes scanning the hallway as if searching for an escape route. At 8 years old, Marcus possessed an intelligence that startled even veteran teachers, but lately something had dimmed that bright spark. His clothes, while clean, had that slightly too large look of hand-me-downs, and his sneakers were held together with careful strips of duct tape that Elena pretended not to notice. "Good morning, Marcus," she called softly, not wanting to startle him. "You're here early today." Marcus shrugged and shuffled into the classroom, settling into his desk in the second row. Elena had learned not to push him for conversation in the mornings. The boy needed time to settle, like a cat finding its bearings in a new room. She continued her preparations, stealing glances at him as he pulled out a worn notebook and began sketching intricate geometric patterns with a stubby pencil. The rest of the class filtered in gradually, filling the room with chatter and energy. Elena greeted each child by name, asking about siblings and pets and weekend adventures. She knew the power of being seen, of having an adult notice when you walked into a room. For some of these children, she might be the only person who asked about their day with genuine interest. "All right, mathematicians," Elena announced once everyone had settled. "Today we're going to explore the magic of multiplication through storytelling." Hands shot up around the room, but Elena noticed Marcus sink lower in his seat. Mathematical concepts came easily to him, almost too easily, but participation had become increasingly rare. She made a mental note to check in with him during independent work time. The morning flew by in a blur of lessons and activities. Elena moved through the classroom like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, guiding discussions, answering questions, and redirecting energy when it threatened to spiral into chaos. Teaching third grade required the stamina of a marathon runner and the patience of a meditation master, but Elena had never imagined doing anything else. When the lunch bell rang, the children exploded from their seats with characteristic enthusiasm. Elena watched them line up, noting who had lunch boxes and who carried crumpled dollar bills for the cafeteria. She tried not to let her eyes linger on Marcus, who hung back until the line had nearly emptied before joining the end. The cafeteria was a cavernous space filled with the sounds of childhood, laughter, arguments over trading snacks, the scrape of plastic chairs against linoleum. Elena walked among the tables, helping with stubborn milk cartons and mediating disputes over napkins. She kept one eye on Marcus, who sat alone at the far end of a table, staring at his empty hands. Elena's heart clenched as she watched him pretend to eat, bringing his cupped hand to his mouth as if it contained food. Other children were too absorbed in their own meals to notice, But Elena saw everything. She'd been teaching long enough to recognize the signs, and she'd seen too many children try to hide their hunger behind elaborate pantomimes. Without drawing attention to herself, Elena approached the lunch counter where Mrs. Patterson, the cafeteria manager, was wiping down surfaces with industrial efficiency. "Helen," Elena said quietly, "I need to add something to my account." Mrs. Patterson looked up, her weathered face creasing into a knowing smile. "Another one?" Elena nodded, pulling out her wallet and extracting a $5 bill. "Marcus, Thompson, can you make sure he gets a full meal? Just tell him his account had money in it." Mrs. Patterson took the money and made a note in her ledger. "You know, Elena, you can't save them all." "Maybe not," Elena replied, watching Marcus trace patterns on the table with his finger, "but I can save this one today." She returned to her patrol of the cafeteria, helping a kindergartner open a particularly stubborn juice box and complimenting a second grader on her elaborate sandwich creation. When she looked back toward Marcus's table, she saw Mrs. Patterson approaching, with a tray laden with chicken nuggets, apple slices, and chocolate milk. "Marcus Thompson," Mrs. Patterson called out. "Looks like your lunch account had some money after all." Marcus looked up with surprise, then confusion, then something that might have been relief. He accepted the tray with mumbled thanks and began eating with the focused intensity of someone who hadn't had breakfast. Elena turned away, not wanting him to catch her watching, but she felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. $5 was $5 she couldn't really spare, but seeing Marcus eat a proper meal was worth every penny. This pattern continued for weeks. Every morning, Elena would check her meager finances, and every afternoon, she would quietly slip money to Mrs. Patterson for Marcus's lunch. She became creative in her budgeting, walking to school instead of driving to save gas money, making pasta 3 nights a week, and skipping her usual weekend coffee shop visit. The sacrifices felt small compared to the transformation she witnessed in Marcus. With regular meals, his energy increased noticeably. He began participating in class discussions, his hand shooting up when Elena posed challenging math problems. His artwork, which had always been detailed, became more vibrant and confident. Most importantly, he started smiling occasionally, small expressions of joy that lit up his serious face like unexpected sunshine. Elena learned to read the subtle signs of Marcus's home situation without prying. His backpack was always meticulously organized, suggesting a child who took responsibility for himself. His homework was completed in careful handwriting, but the paper was sometimes wrinkled as if it had been carried in a pocket. He never mentioned parents or siblings, and parent-teacher conference requests went unanswered. One particularly cold November morning, Marcus arrived at school wearing the same light jacket he'd worn since September. Elena noticed him shivering as he hung it in his cubby, and she made another mental note to check the lost and found for something warmer. She'd learned to become a detective, piecing together the stories her students couldn't or wouldn't tell. During reading time, Elena introduced the class to a story about a young inventor who created solutions to everyday problems. Marcus listened with rapt attention, his eyes lighting up at descriptions of mechanical contraptions and innovative thinking. When Elena asked the
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
class to draw their own inventions, Marcus created an elaborate design for a device that could turn rainwater into hot chocolate. "Tell me about your invention, Marcus," Elena said, crouching beside his desk during independent work time. Marcus's face brightened as he explained the intricate details of his imaginary machine. "See, the rain comes in here." He pointed to a funnel-like structure at the top of his drawing. "And then it goes through these tubes that heat it up and add the chocolate powder automatically. Then it comes out here as hot chocolate for anyone who's cold." Elena studied the drawing, marveling at the complexity of his thinking. "This is incredibly detailed, Marcus. Have you ever thought about becoming an engineer?" Marcus looked puzzled. "What's an engineer?" "Someone who designs and builds things to solve problems," Elena explained. Like your hot chocolate machine. Engineers create bridges and buildings and machines that make life better for people. Do you think I could really do that? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I think you could do anything you set your mind to, Elena replied, meaning every word. That afternoon, as Elena walked through the cafeteria during lunch duty, she overheard a conversation that made her stomach drop. Two teachers were discussing budget cuts and program eliminations, their voices carrying the weight of institutional concern. They're talking about reducing the free lunch program, one was saying. Too many kids qualify, and the funding just isn't there. Elena's mind immediately went to Marcus, who was sitting at his usual table, carefully eating his way through a balanced meal that she had secretly purchased. If the free lunch program was cut, how many children would go hungry? How many Marcuses would sit in cafeterias pretending to eat invisible food? That evening, Elena sat at her kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills, trying to figure out how to stretch her teacher's salary even further. She thought about taking on tutoring work or selling some of her possessions, anything to continue providing for Marcus if the school programs failed him. The mathematics of compassion didn't follow normal rules, she realized. When it came to a child's well-being, somehow the numbers always found a way to work. The next morning brought an unexpected development. As Elena was setting up her classroom before school, Principal Williams knocked on her door. Margaret Williams was a practical woman in her 50s who ran Jefferson Elementary with the efficiency of a ship's captain and the heart of someone who genuinely cared about children. Elena, do you have a minute? Principal Williams asked, stepping into the classroom. Of course, Elena replied, setting down the stack of math worksheets she'd been arranging. Is everything all right? Principal Williams closed the door behind her and took a seat in one of the small student chairs, looking slightly ridiculous with her knees nearly touching her chin. I wanted to talk to you about Marcus Thompson. Elena's heart skipped a beat. Had someone discovered her lunch payments? Was she in trouble for not following proper protocols? What about Marcus? Well, it's interesting, Principal Williams continued. I've been reviewing our lunch account records, and it appears that Marcus has been eating regularly despite the fact that we have no record of his family applying for free or reduced lunch benefits. His account shows payments, but we can't track where they're coming from. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Oh, Principal Williams studied Elena's face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades working with both children and adults. Elena, are you paying for Marcus's lunches? There was no point in denying it. Elena nodded, suddenly feeling like a student called to the principal's office. I know it's not standard procedure, but he was going without food, and I couldn't just watch that happen. Instead of the reprimand Elena expected, Principal Williams smiled. How long have you been doing this? About 6 weeks, Elena admitted. Maybe 7. And you've been paying out of your own pocket this entire time? Elena nodded again, uncertain where this conversation was heading. Principal Williams leaned forward in the tiny chair. Elena, what you're doing is extraordinary. But I'm also concerned about you. I know what teachers make, and I know you're not exactly rolling in extra cash. He needed to eat, Elena said simply. It seemed like the right thing to do. It absolutely was the right thing to do. Principal Williams agreed. But now I'm wondering if we can find a more sustainable solution. Have you had any contact with Marcus's family? Elena shook her head. His emergency contact form lists a grandmother, but the phone number doesn't work. I've sent notes home, but I never get responses. He doesn't talk much about his home situation. Principal Williams made notes in a small notebook she'd pulled from her pocket. I think it's time we did some investigation. A child shouldn't be falling through the cracks like this, and you shouldn't have to carry this financial burden alone. As they spoke, children began filtering into the classroom for the start of the school day. Marcus appeared in the doorway, earlier than usual, and Elena noticed he seemed particularly quiet. Principal Williams stood up from the student chair with some difficulty and smoothed her skirt. We'll continue this conversation later, she told Elena quietly. And Elena, what you've been doing matters more than you know. The day proceeded, normally on the surface, but Elena found herself watching Marcus with new awareness. During math time, she noticed him solve complex problems with an almost mechanical precision that suggested a mind capable of processing information at remarkable speed. During art class, his attention to detail was extraordinary, creating layered compositions that showed sophisticated understanding of perspective and proportion. At lunch, Elena watched Mrs. Patterson deliver Marcus's tray with their usual practiced discretion. Marcus had begun to accept the explanation about his account having money without question, probably because at 8 years old, the mysteries of school lunch accounts seemed no stranger than any other adult system he couldn't control. After school, Elena stayed late to grade papers and prepare for the next day's lessons. The building grew quiet as teachers and staff departed, leaving only the sounds of distant cleaning crews and the hum of fluorescent lights. She was deep in reviewing Marcus's latest writing assignment, a story about a boy who discovered a secret door in his school that led to a library filled with books that could answer any question, when she heard voices in the hallway. Principal Williams was speaking with someone, their voices too low for Elena to make out words, but carrying the tone of serious discussion. Elena tried to focus on her work, but something about the conversation felt significant. When footsteps approached her classroom door, she looked up to see Principal Williams accompanied by an older man in an expensive-looking coat. "Elena," Principal Williams said, "I'd like you to meet someone. This is Mr. Harrison Thompson." Elena stood up, immediately noticing the surname. Thompson, as in Marcus Thompson. The man extended his hand with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention. He was perhaps in his 70s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His handshake was firm, and his clothes spoke of wealth without ostentation. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying a slight rasp that suggested years of experience. "I understand you've been taking care of my grandson." Elena felt the world shift slightly beneath her feet. "Your grandson?" "Marcus," Mr. Thompson replied. "And from what I've learned today, you've been far more attentive to his needs than his own family has been." Principal Williams gestured toward the small reading corner of Elena's classroom, where a few adult-sized chairs were arranged for parent conferences. "Perhaps we should sit down for this conversation." As they settled into the chairs, Elena's mind raced with questions. Where had this grandfather been? Why was Marcus going hungry if he had family with obvious means? How had Mr. Thompson found out about the lunch situation? "I owe you an explanation," Mr. Thompson began, his hands folded precisely in his lap. "And more importantly, I owe you a debt of gratitude that I'm not sure I can ever properly repay." Elena remained silent, sensing that this man had a story to tell and that interrupting would only delay understanding. "Marcus is my daughter Sarah's boy," Mr. Thompson continued. "Sarah struggled with addiction for most of Marcus's life. She's been in and out of treatment centers, in and out of his life. 3 months ago, she dropped him off at his grandmother's house, my ex-wife Janet, and disappeared again." Elena felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Janet has been Marcus's primary caregiver when Sarah couldn't be, but Janet's health has been declining. Early-stage dementia, though we didn't realize how severe it had become. Apparently, she's been forgetting to apply for assistance programs, forgetting to send lunch money, forgetting. His voice trailed off. "Forgetting a lot of things that an 8-year-old boy depends on." "How did you find out?" Elena asked gently. Mr. Thompson's expression grew pained. "I hired a private investigator to track down Sarah. I wanted to establish legal guardianship of Marcus, to give him some stability. The investigator discovered that Marcus was enrolled here at Jefferson Elementary, and when he started asking questions about the boy's well-being, he learned about the lunch situation." He paused, studying Elena's face carefully. He learned that a teacher named Elena Rodriguez had been paying for Marcus's meals every day for the past 2 months, out of her own pocket, without any expectation of recognition or repayment. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks again. It wasn't anything extraordinary. He needed to eat. "Ms. Rodriguez," Mr. Thompson said, leaning forward slightly, I've spent 40 years building businesses. I've employed thousands of people, donated millions to charities, and I thought I understood what generosity looked like. But what you've done, quietly caring for a child who wasn't your responsibility, with resources you could barely spare, that's something else entirely. The classroom fell silent except for the distant sound of a floor buffer in the hallway. Elena looked toward Marcus's empty desk, thinking about all the small moments of the past weeks. His growing confidence during math lessons, the way he'd started smiling when she complimented his work, the careful attention he paid to his classmates, as if he were learning how normal childhood interactions worked. He's an exceptional child, Elena said finally. Brilliant, creative, kind. He just needed someone to notice. He needed someone to care, Mr. Thompson corrected. And you did that when his own family failed him. Principal Williams, who had been quietly observing the conversation, spoke up. Mr. Thompson, what happens now for Marcus? I've already filed for emergency custody, he replied. Janet agrees that she can't provide the care Marcus needs, and Sarah is unreachable. I want to give Marcus a stable home, proper support, and access to educational opportunities that match his abilities. Elena felt a complex mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Marcus would be cared for by someone with the resources to meet his needs, but sadness at the thought of losing the quiet connection they'd built. I have a question for you, Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Thompson said. How would you feel about continuing to be part of Marcus's education? Elena looked puzzled. I don't understand. I'm considering enrolling Marcus in a private academy that can better serve his intellectual gifts. But transitions are hard for children, especially children who've experienced instability. If you were willing, I'd like to arrange for you to continue working with Marcus as a tutor, helping him adjust to his new school while maintaining a connection with someone who's shown him such kindness. Elena's heart leaped at the possibility of continuing to support Marcus's growth, but practical concerns immediately surfaced. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate the offer, but I couldn't possibly afford to leave my position here to tutor one student. Mr. Thompson smiled, and for the first time since entering the classroom, he looked genuinely warm rather than simply polite. Ms. Rodriguez, I don't think you understand. I'm not asking you to leave your position. I'm asking if you'd be willing to tutor Marcus in the evenings and weekends, and I'd like to pay you what amounts to a second teacher's salary for that work. Elena stared at him, struggling to process what he was suggesting. A second teacher's salary for tutoring work would transform her financial situation completely. No more counting bills in the morning. No more choosing between gas money and groceries. No more lying awake at night worried about unexpected expenses. I can see you're overwhelmed, Mr. Thompson continued. But I want you to understand something. What you've done for Marcus goes far beyond providing meals. You've shown him that adults can be trusted to care for children without expecting anything in return. You've demonstrated that his well-being matters to someone. Those are lessons that will shape his entire life. Elena looked toward Marcus's desk again, remembering the shy boy who had hidden in the doorway that first morning, then thinking about the child who now raised his hand eagerly during discussions and created elaborate inventions in his spare time. There's something else, Mr. Thompson said. I'd like to establish a fund at Jefferson Elementary, administered through the principal's office, to ensure that no child here goes hungry. I want to call it the Elena Rodriguez Fund for Student Nutrition. Elena's eyes widened. Mr. Thompson, that's incredibly generous, but you don't need to name it after me. I absolutely do, he replied firmly. Because you've shown me something I'd forgotten in my years of corporate success. Real impact isn't about the size of the gesture. It's about consistency, about showing up day after day for someone who needs you, even when no one's watching. Principal Williams was furiously taking notes, clearly excited about the possibilities this conversation was opening up. Mr. Thompson, a fund like that could help dozens of children. That's exactly what I hope, he said. And Ms. Rodriguez, I hope you'll consider serving on the board that oversees the fund's distribution. You understand these children's needs better than anyone. Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The conversation had moved far beyond anything she could have imagined when she'd slipped that first $5 bill to Mrs. Patterson weeks ago. She'd simply seen a hungry child and responded with the resources she had available. The idea that this small act could grow into something that helped many children felt almost surreal. "I need to ask you something," Elena said, looking directly at Mr. Thompson. "How do I know that Marcus will be happy with you? How do I know that you'll see him the way I do, as a complete person with his own dreams and fears and needs?" Mr. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, and Elena worried she'd overstepped. But when he spoke, his voice carried deep emotion. "Ms. Rodriguez, I failed my daughter. I was so focused on business success that I missed the signs of her struggles. Until it was too late. I can't get those years back, and I can't undo the damage that's been done. But I can try to do better with Marcus. I can try to be the kind of grandfather who notices when a child needs help, who creates space for a boy to invent hot chocolate machines and solve complex math problems and feel safe enough to smile." Elena saw genuine remorse and determination in his eyes, and something inside her relaxed. This wasn't a wealthy man trying to buy his way out of guilt. This was a grandfather who had learned hard lessons about what mattered and was committed to applying that knowledge. "I'd like to meet with Marcus first," Elena said, "to talk with him about the changes ahead and make sure he feels comfortable with the tutoring arrangement." "Of course," Mr. Thompson agreed immediately. "In fact, I was hoping you might help me with our first conversation. Marcus doesn't know me well, and he trusts you. Having you there might make the transition easier." They arranged to meet the following afternoon in Elena's classroom, after Marcus had finished his regular school day. Principal Williams agreed to stay as well, providing additional support and continuity for Marcus during what would undoubtedly be a life-changing conversation. That evening, Elena sat in her small apartment trying to absorb everything that had happened. The financial stress that had been her constant companion for years might finally ease. Marcus would have the stability and resources he deserved. The school would have funds to help other children facing similar challenges. It felt almost too good to be true, like a story someone might tell to illustrate how unexpected kindness could create ripple effects beyond imagination. But underneath the excitement and relief, Elena felt a familiar teacher's concern. Change, even positive change, could be difficult for children. Marcus had experienced enough instability in his short life. She wanted to make sure that whatever came next honored his needs and respected his feelings about the transition. The next day passed slowly, with Elena finding it hard to concentrate on regular classroom activities. Marcus seemed his usual self, participating in discussions and working diligently on assignments. But Elena found herself studying his face for signs of anxiety or confusion. If Mr. Thompson had tried to contact him, Marcus showed no indication of it. When the final bell rang and other students scattered toward buses and pickup lines, Marcus lingered at his desk as he often did, carefully packing his backpack and organizing his materials. Elena had asked him to stay after school for a few minutes, explaining that there was someone who wanted to meet him. Principal Williams arrived first, followed shortly by Mr. Thompson. Elena noticed that he'd dressed more casually today, trading his expensive coat for a simple sweater and slacks. He carried a small wrapped package and looked genuinely nervous, which Elena found endearing. "Marcus," Elena said gently, "I'd like you to meet someone special. This is Mr. Thompson." Marcus looked up politely, but with obvious confusion. He'd been taught to be respectful to adults, but his expression showed he had no idea why this stranger was in his classroom. Mr. Thompson knelt down so he was at Marcus's eye level, a gesture that Elena appreciated. "Hello, Marcus. I know you don't know me, but I know quite a bit about you. I know you're an excellent student and that you create amazing inventions and that you've been very brave during some difficult times." Marcus glanced at Elena uncertainly, then back at Mr. Thompson. "Are you here because I did something wrong?" "Oh no," Mr. Thompson said quickly. "You haven't done anything wrong at all. Actually, I'm here because you're very special to me. Marcus, I'm your grandfather." Elena watched Marcus's face carefully as he processed this information. confusion, then surprise, then something that might have been hope flickered across his features. My mom's dad, Marcus asked quietly. That's right, Mr. Thompson confirmed. Your mom is my daughter, Sarah, and that makes you my grandson. I know we haven't spent much time together, but I'd very much like to change that. Marcus was quiet for several long seconds, his 8-year-old mind working through implications that most adults would find complex. Is my mom coming too? Elena's heart ached at the question. This child had learned to hope carefully, to protect himself from disappointment. Your mom is getting help right now, Mr. Thompson said honestly. She's not able to take care of you the way you deserve. Your grandmother Janet loves you very much, but she's been forgetting things lately, and that's made it hard for her to take care of herself and you. Marcus nodded solemnly, as if this confirmed things he'd already suspected. Is that why I haven't been getting lunch money? Mr. Thompson's expression grew pained. Yes, that's part of it. But Marcus, did you know that Ms. Rodriguez has been making sure you had lunch every day? Marcus looked at Elena with surprise. You have. Elena knelt down beside Mr. Thompson, putting herself at Marcus's level as well. I noticed you weren't eating, sweetheart. I wanted to make sure you had good food every day. You paid for my food? Marcus asked, his voice small. I did, Elena confirmed. Because you mattered to me, and I wanted you to be healthy and strong. Marcus was quiet again, and Elena could see him processing not just the information, but the emotional implications. An adult had noticed his need and responded without being asked. An adult had spent her own money to care for him. These were concepts that required processing. Marcus, Mr. Thompson said gently, I'd like you to come live with me. I have a big house with a room that could be yours, and I'd like to make sure you always have everything you need. Good food, clothes that fit, books to read, and space to work on your inventions. Would I still go to school here? Marcus asked, glancing around Elena's classroom. Well, that's something we need to talk about, Mr. Thompson said. There are some schools that have special programs for students who are really good at math and science, like you are. But Ms. Rodriguez would still be part of your education. I've asked her if she'd be willing to work with you as a tutor, too. Help you with homework and projects, and to keep being your friend. Marcus looked at Elena again, and she saw relief in his eyes. Whatever other changes were coming, he wouldn't lose his connection to the adult who had shown him consistent care. Can I think about it? Marcus asked, displaying emotional intelligence that impressed all three adults. Of course you can, Mr. Thompson said. This is a big decision, and you should take time to think about how you feel. But while you're thinking, I wonder if you'd like to see where you might live, and maybe we could spend some time getting to know each other better. He offered Marcus the wrapped package he'd been holding. I brought you something. Marcus accepted the gift carefully and unwrapped it to reveal a sophisticated set of building blocks designed for engineering projects. His eyes lit up as he examined the various gears, motors, and structural pieces. These are for making real machines, he said with wonder. I thought you might enjoy experimenting with them, Mr. Thompson said. I used to be an engineer myself before I started my business. I always loved figuring out how things worked and building solutions to problems. Elena watched the interaction with growing confidence. Mr. Thompson wasn't trying to overwhelm Marcus with grand gestures or promises. He was meeting the boy where he was, offering connection and respect rather than demanding immediate acceptance. Mr. Thompson, Marcus said carefully, why didn't you help before? When Grandma was forgetting things. The question hung in the air, and Elena appreciated Marcus's direct approach. Children deserved honest answers, even when those answers were complicated. That's a very good question, Marcus, Mr. Thompson replied. The truth is, I didn't know how much help you needed. Your grandmother didn't tell me about her memory problems, and I didn't visit often enough to see what was happening. I made the mistake of thinking that everything was fine because no one asked me for help. I should have been paying closer attention. Will you pay attention now? Marcus asked. Yes, Mr. Thompson said firmly. That's a promise. Part of paying attention means listening to you, to what you want and how you feel about things. You'll always have a say in decisions that affect your life. Principal Williams, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Marcus, what questions do you have about all of this? Marcus thought for a moment. If I live with my grandfather, can I still eat lunch with Mrs. Patterson? The adults exchanged glances, and Elena realized that Marcus was worried about losing the routine and connections that had become important to him. Mrs. Patterson will always be happy to see you, Elena said. And even if you go to a different school eventually, we can visit her together sometimes. What about my inventions? Can I still show them to you? Absolutely, Elena said, feeling her throat tighten with emotion. I will always want to see your inventions and hear about your ideas. Mr. Thompson listened to these exchanges with growing understanding. Marcus wasn't just worried about practical arrangements. He was concerned about maintaining the relationships that had provided him with stability and care. Marcus, Mr. Thompson said, Ms. Rodriguez will always be part of your life if you want her to be. She's going to help you with your schoolwork, but more than that, she's your friend. Friends don't stop being friends just because other things change. Marcus nodded slowly, and Elena could see him beginning to relax. The unknown was still unknown, but the known, his connection to Elena and the sense of being cared for, would continue. Can we try it for a little while first? Marcus asked. Like a practice run? Mr. Thompson smiled, and Elena saw genuine warmth in his expression. That's exactly what we should do. How about you come stay with me this weekend? And we see how it feels. If you like it, we can try a whole week. We'll take it step by step, and you can always talk to Ms. Rodriguez about how things are going. And if I don't like it, then we figure out what needs to change to make it better, Mr. Thompson said. Your happiness and comfort are the most important things. Elena felt a surge of respect for this man who was handling a delicate situation with such care. Marcus needed adults who would prioritize his emotional well-being alongside his physical needs, and Mr. Thompson seemed to understand that. The meeting concluded with plans for Marcus to spend the upcoming weekend with his grandfather, with Elena's phone number programmed into Mr. Thompson's phone so Marcus could call her if needed. They also scheduled a follow-up meeting for the next week to discuss how the trial period was going. As Mr. Thompson prepared to leave, he turned to Elena one more time. Ms. Rodriguez, I meant what I said about the tutoring position and the nutrition fund. I hope you'll consider both seriously. I will, Elena promised. And Mr. Thompson? Thank you for seeing Marcus the way he deserves to be seen. Thank you for showing him what it means to be truly cared for, he replied. I have a lot to learn about being the grandfather he needs, but I couldn't ask for a better teacher than someone who's already proven how much she believes in him. After they left, Elena sat alone in her classroom for a long time, watching the autumn light fade outside her windows. The day had brought changes she never could have anticipated when she first noticed Marcus sitting alone at an empty lunch table. Her simple act of providing meals had somehow opened a door to transformation, not just for Marcus, but for herself and potentially for many other children. She thought about the teacher's salary that had always felt inadequate, the careful budgeting that had become second nature, the small sacrifices that had seemed so significant. Now, with the possibility of additional income from tutoring and meaningful work with the nutrition fund, she could imagine a different kind of financial freedom. But more importantly, she could imagine continuing to make a difference in Marcus's life and the lives of other children who needed advocates. Elena packed her materials and prepared to leave school, but instead of her usual concerns about stretching her paycheck until Friday, her mind was full of possibilities. She thought about Marcus's weekend with his grandfather, hoping it would go well, but prepared to support him if it didn't. She thought about the other students in her class who might benefit from a nutrition fund that could provide meals without stigma or bureaucracy. The story had begun with a simple observation and a $5 bill. It was growing into something much larger, but at its heart, it remained the same. A child had needed help, and the adults around him had responded with care. Sometimes, Elena reflected, the most extraordinary outcomes grew from the most ordinary acts of kindness. The weekend passed slowly for Elena, who found herself wondering how Marcus was adjusting to his grandfather's house. She'd given Mr. Thompson her phone number, but she'd also respected Marcus's independence by not calling to check in. 8-year-olds needed space to form their own opinions and relationships. Monday morning brought Marcus back to school with a small smile and a new backpack that still had its tags attached. Elena greeted him with her usual warmth, but waited for him to share details about his weekend rather than asking directly. Ms. Rodriguez, Marcus said as he unpacked his materials, "My grandfather has a workshop in his basement. He showed me how to use real tools, and we started building a robot together." Elena's heart lifted at the genuine excitement in his voice. "That sounds wonderful, Marcus. How did it feel staying in a new place?" "Different," Marcus said thoughtfully. "But good different. He made pancakes for breakfast, and he asked me what I wanted to do instead of just telling me." "And Ms. Rodriguez?" "He has pictures of my mom when she was little. She looked happy then." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the wistfulness in Marcus's voice. This child carried so much understanding of adult complexities, but he was still hoping for connection to the mother who had struggled to care for him. "That must have been special to see," Elena said gently. "He said I could call him Grandpa Robert if I wanted to," Marcus continued. "Not just Mr. Thompson." And he said next, "Weekend we're going to visit the Science Museum, and maybe you could come with us if you want to." Elena smiled at the invitation, touched that Marcus wanted to include her in his new experiences. "I'd love that, if your grandfather agrees." The rest of the week proceeded smoothly, with Marcus showing increased confidence and engagement in classroom activities. Elena noticed that his lunch account was now properly funded, and Mrs. Patterson reported that Mr. Thompson had also made a substantial donation to ensure other students wouldn't face the same challenges Marcus had endured. Friday afternoon brought another conversation with Principal Williams, this time focused on concrete plans for the nutrition fund and Elena's potential involvement with the school's expanded support services. "Elena," Principal Williams said, as they sat in her office reviewing preliminary paperwork, "Mr. Thompson's donation is going to transform what we can offer students. We're looking at funding not just lunch programs, but also weekend backpack programs, emergency clothing supplies, and after-school snack programs." Elena studied the proposals spread across the principal's desk, amazed at the scope of what was being planned. "This could help so many families." "That's the goal," Principal Williams agreed. "And Mr. Thompson specifically wants you involved in determining how the funds are allocated. He believes your classroom experience gives you insights that administrators might miss." The phone rang, interrupting their discussion. Principal Williams answered with her usual professional efficiency. Then her expression shifted to something Elena couldn't quite read. "Yes, he's here," Principal Williams said into the phone. "We'll be right there." She hung up and turned to Elena with an expression that mixed concern and curiosity. "That was the front office. Marcus's grandmother Janet is here, and she's asking to take him home immediately. She seems quite agitated." Elena felt her stomach drop. Marcus had been thriving with the stability his grandfather provided. The thought of him being pulled back into an uncertain situation filled her with protective instincts she couldn't suppress. "What does that mean legally?" Elena asked as they hurried toward the main office. "I'm not sure," Principal Williams admitted. "Mr. Thompson mentioned filing for custody, but I don't know if it's been finalized. If Janet still has legal guardianship rights, this could get complicated." They arrived at the front office to find a woman in her 70s pacing anxiously near the reception desk. Janet Thompson was thin and frail-looking, with gray hair that seemed hastily arranged and clothes that suggested she'd dressed quickly. Her eyes had the slightly unfocused quality Elena had learned to recognize in students' grandparents who were struggling with cognitive decline. "Where is Marcus?" Janet demanded as soon as she saw Principal Williams. "I need to take him home. Right now? Robert has no right to keep him from me." Principal Williams spoke calmly but firmly. "Mrs. Thompson, Marcus is in class right now. Can you help me understand what's happening?" "Robert came to my house," Janet said, her voice rising slightly. "He took Marcus away. He said I couldn't take care of him properly, but I've been taking care of that boy just fine. I've been taking care of him since Sarah left." Elena watched Janet carefully, noting the defensive tone and the slight tremor in her hands. This was a woman who was scared and confused, not someone acting out of malice. Mrs. Thompson, Elena said gently, stepping forward. I'm Ms. Rodriguez, Marcus's teacher. He's been doing very well in school lately. Janet turned to Elena with relief, as if finding a sympathetic ear. See? He's fine. He doesn't need Robert's fancy house and his money. He needs his family. Of course he needs family, Elena agreed. And I can see how much you love him. But Mrs. Thompson, have you been feeling well lately? Taking care of an 8-year-old is a big responsibility. Janet's expression wavered between confusion and defensiveness. I forget things sometimes, but everyone forgets things. That doesn't mean I can't take care of my grandson. Principal Williams stepped in. Mrs. Thompson, why don't we call Mr. Thompson and see if we can all sit down together to discuss what's best for Marcus? I don't want to talk to Robert, Janet said firmly. I want to take Marcus home. At that moment, Marcus appeared in the hallway with his backpack, having been summoned from his classroom by the office assistant. Elena watched his face as he saw his grandmother, noting the complex mix of emotions that flickered across his features. Love, certainly, but also worry and something that might have been resignation. Grandma Janet, Marcus said tentatively. Janet's demeanor immediately softened as she knelt down and opened her arms. Marcus, sweetheart, I've come to take you home. I've missed you so much. Marcus hugged his grandmother, but Elena noticed he didn't let go of his backpack. Grandma, are you feeling okay? You look tired. I'm fine, honey, Janet said, though Elena could see that she wasn't. I just want you to come home with me where you belong. Marcus looked uncertainly between the adults, clearly torn between loyalty to his grandmother and the stability he'd found with his grandfather. Grandma, Grandpa Robert has been taking good care of me, and Ms. Rodriguez is going to help me with my homework. Janet's expression hardened again. You don't need Robert's help. We've been doing fine on our own. Elena decided to intervene before the situation escalated further. Mrs. Thompson, Marcus has told me wonderful things about living with you. I can see how much you care about him. But wouldn't it be good for him to have both you and his grandfather looking out for him? Robert thinks I'm not capable, Janet said, her voice breaking slightly. He thinks I'm too old, too confused. But I raised Sarah, and I can raise Marcus. Elena's heart went out to this woman who was fighting to maintain her role as a caregiver even as her capacity diminished. Mrs. Thompson, raising Sarah shows what a devoted grandmother you are. But sometimes loving someone means accepting help when it's offered. Principal Williams's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it quickly, then spoke quietly to Elena. Mr. Thompson is on his way. He should be here in 10 minutes. Marcus seemed to sense the tension among the adults. Grandma Janet, do you want to see the robot I'm building with Grandpa Robert? Ms. Rodriguez, can I show her my drawing? Elena recognized Marcus's attempt to diffuse the situation by redirecting attention to something positive. Of course, Marcus, why don't you show your grandmother the invention you've been working on? As Marcus pulled out his latest drawing, a detailed design for a machine that could organize books automatically, Janet's expression softened. You're so smart, sweetheart, just like your mother was when she was your age. Grandpa Robert says I might want to be an engineer someday, Marcus said. He's teaching me how to use real tools safely. Janet looked conflicted, as if part of her recognized that Marcus was thriving, but another part resented the implication that someone else could provide what she couldn't. Mr. Thompson arrived within minutes, entering the office with obvious concern. When he saw Janet, his expression grew sad rather than angry. Janet, he said gently, I've been worried about you. When I went to check on you this morning, your neighbors said you'd been confused about where Marcus was. Janet's defensive posture crumbled slightly. I know where he is. He's with you, but he should be with me. He can be with both of us, Mr. Thompson said. Janet, you're his grandmother. You'll always be important to him. But we both know you've been having some difficult days lately. Marcus watched this exchange with the serious expression of a child who understood more than he should have to. Elena wanted to protect him from the pain of seeing the adults he loved struggle with such difficult realities. "Mrs. Thompson," Elena said, "would you like to come visit Marcus's classroom? I'd love to show you some of the work he's been doing." The suggestion seemed to calm Janet, giving her a concrete way to connect with Marcus's daily life. As they walked down the hallway, Elena noticed Mr. Thompson gently taking his ex-wife's arm to steady her, a gesture that spoke of long-standing care despite their complicated history. In the classroom, Marcus proudly showed his grandmother various projects and assignments, his enthusiasm gradually easing the tension that had filled the office. Janet seemed more oriented in this environment, asking appropriate questions about his schoolwork and smiling at his explanations. "He's always been brilliant," Janet told Elena. "Even as a tiny child, he could figure out how things worked." "He's exceptional," Elena agreed. "And I can see he gets his curiosity and intelligence from a family that values learning." As they talked, Elena observed the dynamics between Janet and Mr. Thompson. Despite their differences, they both clearly loved Marcus and wanted what was best for him. The challenge was finding an arrangement that honored Janet's role while ensuring Marcus's needs were met. "Janet," Mr. Thompson said eventually, "what if Marcus stayed with me during the school week, but spent weekends with you? That way he'd have routine and support for his schoolwork, but you'd still be a big part of his life." Janet considered this proposal, her expression cycling through various emotions. "Would he want that? To spend time with his old grandmother?" Marcus immediately went to her side. "Grandma Janet, I love spending time with you. Remember how you taught me to make paper airplanes that could fly really far?" Elena watched Janet's face light up at the memory. "You made the best airplanes I ever saw. Maybe you could teach me some new designs," Marcus suggested. "And I could show you more about the robot Grandpa Robert and I are building." The adults spent the next hour working out preliminary arrangements that would give Marcus stability while maintaining his connection to both grandparents. Elena found herself serving as an informal mediator, helping translate between Janet's emotional needs and Mr. Thompson's practical concerns. By the time they concluded their discussion, Janet seemed more settled and Mr. Thompson appeared relieved. Most importantly, Marcus looked hopeful about an arrangement that wouldn't force him to choose between the adults he loved. "Ms. Rodriguez," Janet said as they prepared to leave, "thank you for taking such good care of Marcus. I can see why he talks about you so much." Elena felt a lump in her throat. "Mrs. Thompson, Marcus is lucky to have a grandmother who loves him as much as you do. That kind of love is the most important thing any child can have." As the Thompson family left the school together, Elena remained in her classroom thinking about the complexities of family and care. She'd started this journey by simply ensuring that a hungry child had lunch. Now she was witnessing the reconstruction of a family system that could support Marcus's growth while honoring the relationships that had sustained him. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Marcus's life. He lived with his grandfather during school days, benefiting from consistent meals, homework support, and access to educational resources. Weekends with his grandmother provided continuity with his history and the special kind of attention that only she could provide. Elena watched Marcus flourish under this arrangement. His confidence continued to grow, his academic performance excelled, and perhaps most importantly, he began to exhibit the kind of emotional security that allowed him to take appropriate risks and form deeper friendships with his classmates. The nutrition fund that Mr. Thompson had established began to show its impact throughout Jefferson Elementary. Elena worked with Principal Williams to identify students who needed support, always maintaining the dignity and privacy that she'd learned was so important. No child should have to feel ashamed of needing help with basic necessities. One afternoon, as Elena was organizing materials for the next day's science lesson, Marcus approached her desk with a wrapped package. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, "I made something for you." Elena opened the package to find a small wooden box with intricate hinges and a mechanism that opened it automatically when a button was pressed. Inside was a note written in Marcus's careful handwriting. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible and feeding me when I was hungry. You taught me that kindness is the most important invention of all. Elena felt tears spring to her eyes as she examined the sophisticated craftsmanship of the box. Marcus, this is beautiful. Did you make this? Yourself? Grandpa Robert helped me with the hinges, Marcus said proudly. But I designed it. I wanted to make something that showed how grateful I am. Elena hugged him carefully, mindful of the 8-year-old boy who still needed gentle affection from trusted adults. Marcus, you don't need to thank me. Taking care of each other is what people do. But you took care of me when you didn't have to, Marcus said. That's different. As Elena looked at this remarkable child who had taught her so much about resilience and hope, she realized that he was right. Choosing to care for someone beyond obligation, beyond expectation of reward, was different. It was the kind of choice that could change the trajectory of a life. The story that had begun with a teacher's careful budget and a hungry child's pretend eating had grown into something larger than Elena could have imagined. Marcus had a stable home, a bright educational future, and the knowledge that adults could be trusted to notice and respond to children's needs. The school had resources to help other vulnerable students. Elena had financial security and the opportunity to continue making a difference in children's lives. But perhaps most importantly, everyone involved had learned something about the power of small acts of kindness to create ripple effects that touched multiple lives. Elena thought about the $5 bills she'd counted so carefully weeks ago, and how investing them in one child's well-being had somehow returned to her multiplied in ways she never could have calculated. As Marcus returned to his desk to pack up for the day, Elena looked around her classroom with new eyes. Every child here had stories, needs, dreams, and potential challenges that might not be immediately visible. Her experience with Marcus had reminded her that teaching was about more than curriculum delivery. It was about seeing children completely, responding to their needs with creativity and care, and believing in their capacity to overcome obstacles. The wooden box sat on her desk, its ingenious mechanism a testament to Marcus's growing confidence and skills. But more than that, it was a reminder that when adults chose to invest in children's potential, the returns were immeasurable, not in dollars and cents, but in the kind of human flourishing that made all the difference in the world. Later that evening, Elena sat in her apartment with improved financial security but unchanged values. She thought about the teacher who had gone to work that morning months ago, worried about stretching $11 until payday. That teacher had made a choice based on compassion rather than calculation, and that choice had transformed multiple lives. Tomorrow would bring new students with new needs and new opportunities to make a difference. Elena looked forward to it all, knowing that sometimes the most important work happened not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments when one person chose to see another person's need and respond with whatever resources they had available. The story of Marcus and Elena and the Thompson family continued, not as a fairy tale with a neat ending, but as real life with ongoing challenges and continuing growth. But it was real life infused with the knowledge that kindness mattered, that children deserved advocates, and that sometimes the smallest acts of care could grow into something beautiful beyond imagination. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.